Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as we leave the old year behind, we delve into the promise of young Africa. Its youth is key to changing relationships both on and off the continent, and I delve into the shifts in store with the African Union's envoy for the demographic. Also, 2024 is set to be a big one for several of the continent's top heavyweights, from elections to economic overhauls. We delve deep into some of the landmark dates already set on the African calendar. And Tshisekedi is ready for a second mandate. The DR Congolese president secures a landslide victory, but some opposition leaders have slammed last month's vote with accusations that it was fixed. But first, we're all a year older, but Africa's still got the youngest population in the world. Over 70% of its people are under 30, and the continent's future is a reflection of global prospects, as by 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet are expected to be African. Now, Africa's human capital is a humongous resource, but it will take work to make the most of that potential. On these first days of a new year's, we'll be looking into 2024 and beyond with the African Union's youngest diplomat, the organization's special envoy on youth affairs in Africa, Chido Cleopatra Mpimba. Chido, Your Excellency, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us right in the freshest day of 2024. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to you too.
So it's great having you on the show. But first of all, give us a bit of a big picture view of your take on what youth empowerment will mean for Africa in 2024.
Okay, I think because we have so many elections that are coming up, over 10 countries in Africa having elections, from South Africa to Rwanda to Namibia to Ghana. So it's quite clear that when it comes to empowerment for young people in Africa, it has to do with political empowerment. How can we empower our young people within the continent to also run for different political positions that will also help in shaping the Africa that we want and their countries? How can we also make sure that young people actually go to the polls to vote? Because we've seen that previously a lot of young people have not been voting. And I think it's very important that when we talk about empowerment, given that it's such a big year on elections, we have more young people going to vote, but we also have more young people taking up political positions as well of leadership.
And when we were speaking earlier, you were saying that one of the things that you think is a really big issue when it comes to forward-looking African young African youth is security. Is there any shift in the way that African youth expect to see that managed on the continent?
Definitely. I think we've also seen that there's been a rise of coups, and a lot of young people actually responsible for those coups. It also shows that a lot of young people are taking matters into their own hands. So that's been a shift that we've seen, but I think it's also important that we look at how we address such issues collectively, intergenerationally as well. And we need to see that rise in a shift of peace and security to have young people also on the table. And again, it goes back to political leadership. It goes back to democracy and making sure that they're also collectively involved in the decisions that are made at national level. So we need to look at how that shift is going to come. It can come in a negative way if, young people are not fully involved. But I think it's very important that we find ways to tackle, these issues and not, continue in a cycle of unconstitutional changes of governance, due to lack of involvement of young people in political spaces.
And so we're talking there about the importance of incorporating more young voices in the way that Africa's political landscape is shaped. But, in the intro into our conversation, we were talking a little bit there about how Africa's population is expected to take up a substantial amount of the global population by 2050. How do you think this is going to affect the relationship of the continent with other regions going forward?
We've seen a rise in development, and as much as, of course, looking in the past when it comes to economic empowerment of the future of Africa. There's been issues of high unemployment, issues of social development, but we're seeing that shift in innovation that's coming from young people. We're also seeing a shift with regards to young people creating employment for themselves and taking matters in their own hands in that regard. So it's very important that even when you look at the global landscape in terms of decisions that are made, including even on stuff to do with climate change, that, we also have Africa on the forefront, and taking decisions collectively is very important. If I take it back to climate change, for instance, just last year with the first ever Africa Climate Summit, where, Africa is coming together to make those collective decisions and that bargaining of power. So again, we're seeing that shift because we're coming together collectively and making sure that whatever decisions are made in a global landscape, it's also important that collectively as Africa, we're also involved and we also get to negotiate what can affect us, what's already affecting us now and what will affect us in the future too.
Now, you've also recently been appointed as the co-chair of the WHO, the World Health Organization's Commission on Social Connection. What does that mean within an African context?
Okay, so, we've seen a rise, especially with COVID-19, there's been a rise of social isolation and loneliness that came as a result of COVID-19. We've also seen that rise with young people where, when it comes to social isolation, it knows no age at this moment of time. So, because of that, again, it also affects mental health. And, mental health in Africa is already stigmatized. A lot of young people are committing suicide. A lot of young people are not able to speak out with the challenges that they're faced with, again, which goes back to issues to do with, empowerment as well. And given that, I think it's a very important decision that the World Health Organization has made, in terms of, social isolation being an emerging public health issue globally. But not only that, also, giving me the honor to be a commissioner and to also co-chair alongside other world leaders to see how we can tackle this issue, but making sure that even Africa, is not left behind with that. Often there's so many challenges that we're faced with globally, but specifically for Africa, we've seen a lot of that politically, we've seen a lot of that economically, and because of that, issues to do with mental health are often sidelines. And at the same time, these are issues that young people are genuinely being faced with that we also need to, tackle as a matter of urgency.
Chido, Cleopatra Mpemba, thank you so much for seeing us into this new year with your insight into some of the hopes for the continent's youth. As she mentioned there, the 2024 is set to be a big one for several of the continent, from elections to economic overhauls. We'll now hear from Shirley Sitburn, who will talk us through some of those landmark dates to look out for.
National elections are scheduled in the countries highlighted on this map. That's almost 1/3 of the countries in Africa. Among them, Senegal in February. Dozens have registered their candidacy. Among those leading in opinion polls, the current Prime Minister, Magubane, and the imprisoned opposition figure, Ousmane Sonko. The names of the candidates qualified to run will be announced on January 20th at the latest. Some say 2024 could bring significant change.
2024 is a turning point for Senegal. We are at a crossroads.
Elections are also scheduled in Algeria, in Ghana, where surveys show the opposition could win. In South Africa, the ANC could for the first time lose its majority in parliament. In Rwanda, voters will elect a president, with Paul Kagame running for a 4th term. This as the country prepares to commemorate the 1994 genocide. African countries will mark a milestone in their trade integration this year. All central banks are expected to join the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which makes cross-border payments easier. Experts forecast that growth will be higher in 2024 at roughly 4%. One of the first and most exciting events of the year for many is likely to also have economic fallouts, but it's first and foremost a sports event, the African Cup of Nations. Fans are expected in Ivory Coast on January 13th.
Well, DR Congolese leader Felix Tshisekedi is set to be returned for a 2nd term by last month's election. The country's electoral commission says that the president's win was secured with more than 73% of ballots. Several opposition candidates, though, have claimed that the exercise was fixed. Our correspondent have more.
A triumph for Felix Tshisekedi as he wins a second term. Celebrations erupted outside the president's headquarters after he won over 73% of votes, miles ahead of his biggest rival, Moise Katumbi, who collected just 18% of voters' support, according to provisional results from the Electoral Commission. Employment, purchasing power and the defence budget were all mentioned as he spoke to his supporters. And after a campaign marked by nationalistic speeches, he called for national unity.
You rallied as one for these elections, in the aim of bringing to maturity and strengthening our young democracy, of preserving our unity and defending the integrity of our country.
But before the Commission even revealed its latest figures, opposition parties rejected the results. 9 candidates warn of irregularities in the voting process and are all demanding that the election be reorganised.
Mr. Kadima, the president of the Commission, must be arrested immediately and taken to court so that he can tell us what he did with the money he took, why machines were found in people's homes, and why he organized this fraud.
Over 41 million people were registered to vote, but just 43% are believed to have actually cast their ballots. The Constitutional Court will announce the final results on the 10th of January.
Well, world-renowned South African photographer whose work documented some of the most significant years of Nelson Mandela has died. Peter Magubane's work captured the pain and struggle of his nation's apartheid era over 4 decades, and he even became a target of the racist regime because of his unflinching imagery. He died on the 1st of the year, aged 91. And soprano Clementine Ayefuni captivated fans in the Togolese capital during New Year's celebrations. The performance marked her debut at the renowned Palais des Congrès and reflects the growing popularity of European classical music in Africa. Our correspondents attended.
After 12 years of dedication to her craft, Clementine Ayefuni makes her final adjustments before gracing the stage at the Palais des Congrès, the Congress Center in Lomé. This performance is an accomplishment for one of the few sopranos in the country.
It's nice to be reminded that we are supported, that the audience has been supporting us since we started to reach this level.
For this concert, featuring classical and sacred songs, Clementine Ayefuni collaborated with the National Symphony Orchestra of Ghana, renowned for performing for high-profile individuals worldwide, like Queen Elizabeth II and former South African President Thabo Mbeki.
Wow, it's an honor. It is an honor. I've heard her sing before, and she was amazing.
The singer can skillfully perform the famous habanera from Bizet's Carmen, as well as iconic classical compositions by Mozart, Puccini, Rossini, and Offenbach.
Little by little, year after year, we can hear the voice maturing. And tonight, I heard a splendid voice. Clementine is becoming a reference, a rising voice.
Africa incorporates its cultural wealth into the classical genre, creating a captivating blend of conventional instruments with African songs and rhythms.
I discovered something new today. This blending of cultures created an amazing sound.
These new classical voices are inspiring a new generation of composers. They strive to promote and popularize classical music in Africa.
Oh, that was amazing. Well, though we'll have to leave it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks so much for joining us. Do so again if you can. And we wish you the very best for 2024.
France 24, a different point of view.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.